Welcome back, everybody. This is your favorite two host, Dan and Anthony, with the Pregame Network podcast. This is episode 22, I believe. Yeah, 22.
Excellent.
Gonna talk about more things, video games. Actually, a pretty decent week to talk about things, considering Sony's announcement. But before we get to that, we'll go over what we've been playing. I'm gonna go first. It's gonna be super quick. Um, I've been playing nothing but Space Marine 2. It's it's so good. I love it. I'm not gonna blow my load on like pseudo-review or whatnot, because I can talk about it for like 15-20 minutes, but
There's
it
nothing
is a
wrong
lot of
with
fun.
that, but we'll get through this first, and if you want to do that afterwards, we absolutely can. But is that all you've been playing? Don't blame me if it is.
Yes,
Yeah,
actually, I've wanted to jump back into Satisfactory. You remember that game?
yeah, I remember.
They just came out of early access. They finally launched their 1.0 release. So I'll talk about that a little bit more. I mean, there's not really a whole lot to talk about, but like, it came out, I wanted to try it, but like, that's a game where like the whole thing kind of demands like a enormous time sink.
Okay.
Um, so that's the only other thing. But that was just a mere curiosity. Like, I don't even know if I'm gonna play that at any time soon. I just had the inkling of like dipping my toe back in, because it's a fun, like, pretty therapeutic game, actually. Like, it's very chill, laid back, and
Yeah,
it's just fun to build your own factory.
Sims and managements like that, like anything where you're just sitting down and you're kind of setting things up or building things up or just managing things can be very therapeutic.
Yeah. But yeah, as far as I'm concerned, I've been playing Space Marine 2. We'll get more into it after you go through your spiel, but yep, that's pretty much it for me.
As far as what I've been playing, same, almost like the same as last week. I've been playing just different Dead Rising games. I beat Dead Rising 2. I liked it more than I remember liking it the first time, which I kind of touched on, last week. Uh, Played a lot of Space Marine 2 with you also.
Mhm.
I downloaded, but I haven't tried it yet. There's a game called Bite Breakers.
Like,
It's
I've never heard of it.
Yeah, it was announced like yesterday or last night, and
Hmm.
it's open test, which isn't even really a beta. It's a let's see if everybody likes this to see if we're gonna make it. Landed like 2 hours ago. Basically, if you have you ever heard of this game Omega Strikers? I might have brought it
No.
up once on the podcast. So basically, it's like they describe it as like a competitive air hockey thing, but you're like playing as characters running around trying to smack the piece around, and it's very stylish and all that kind of shit. I'm not
Hmm.
doing it justice, but it's not really for me. I kind of suck at it because it's almost got like MOBA movement, even though it's not a MOBA, and
Okay.
that game didn't really do all that hot, and they kind of announced end of service a couple months ago, and they said like, hey, we want to do more things in the world, and what they came up with is called Bite Breakers, and it's essentially a platform fighter like Smash Brothers, but
Hmm.
it's a battle royale. So it's like 40 people go in. It's a massive map that you can walk around
Oh,
like
wow.
you're playing in Smash Brothers, and it's just a fight to
Is
see
it
it.
like a 2D or a 3D type of
It's a
fighting game?
it's a like imagine Smash Brothers. I say 2D platform fighter because it is that movement, like you're playing a platforming game, but you're
Okay.
also fighting in it like a Smash Brothers would. Um,
Hmm.
if you ever played the 3DS Smash Brothers Smash Run, it's almost like that, but you're competing with other players to survive, and it's got the typical shit like the walls are closing in, you can't stay out there. There's items you can pick up and whatnot. I didn't get a chance to try it yet, but I downloaded it and I watched somebody else play it. I'm interested to try that. Other than that, I mean, the only other game I've been playing is fucking Solitaire. That very, very. I've been playing so much fucking Solitaire for this Xbox reward shit because I'm like, oh, I'm close to a gift card.
Why?
I may as well just play a shit ton of fucking
Oh
Solitaire
my
because
god.
that's always a good time.
I
And I'm
don't even
leveling
know
up
how
in
many
Solitaire
points I
too.
have. I have,
Yeah.
I have so many points.
Yeah, you should check that out. They've gated it a lot lately, where you got to check in, but they give you a
Mhm.
notification. You check in to turn it in or whatnot. And it's something I just haven't kept up with. And I have a lot of points banked from when we worked at Best Buy, and I was binging
Right.
everything. So, and my only gripe is that I have like this old card game collection from 2005, and it's just awesome. It's got like every game under the sun, and I'd much rather
Mhm.
play that because it has all the shit. But I gotta play this for whatever. But it's trivial nonsense from like the simplest game you could possibly play on your fucking computer. But that's really the gist of it, at least from what I remember, anyway.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
All right. Well, I mean, that was a pretty quick segment. There wasn't like a whole lot to talk about there.
Yeah.
I mean, we might as well just go right into Space Marine 2 because
May
it's
as
the only
well.
thing that I've been playing.
Yeah.
And
I mentioned, not to say it right away, just because I would prefer it get its own spot, almost like a pseudo review kind of thing. Like,
uh,
if you want to just go all in and talk about it that way, by all means, kick us
yeah,
off.
well, I mean, all right. So, I mean, I guess I'm gonna break it down by like game mode because the game has a total of three modes. There's the single player campaign, the PVE operations mode, and then the Eternal War PvP mode.
Hmm.
So, as far you didn't beat it yet, right?
I have not beaten the campaign. I'm a few missions
Okay.
in. I've done a few ops with you and Eric, and I have not touched PvP at all.
So the campaign is I really enjoyed it. From like I've been kind of digging around over the last week to see what like the Warhammer community at large thinks of it from like uh more of a place of like the people who are really into the Warhammer lore, like what are their opinions? So I personally really enjoyed the story. There were some aspects where like it was like an odd decision or it was like for example the big bad and the main villain, like I have no idea who that guy is. And apparently he's not mentioned like anywhere in the Warhammer lore. I think they might have made like created him
Hmm.
for this game, which is weird because like
There's a ton of lore they could have
yeah,
drawn
yeah,
from.
exactly.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
mean, that's the first thing I think of because we've talked ad nauseum about that. It's a topic that pretty much comes up whenever we talk about Warhammer, is just how much lore there
Mm.
is. But I mean, at the same time, if they want to make their own thing, that kind of makes sense. But you know,
Well, I will say this, like I really, really, really like the Warhammer 40K universe. I am by no means like a lore expert. Um, like I've only read one book when it comes to Warhammer. I've never played the tabletop game. I really enjoy the games. Like that's my little corner of the Warhammer 40K
yeah,
fandom. Like I really, really, really like the video games. Um, they've mostly been strategy games, but there are a couple that are action games. Like so, the first Space Marine, obviously, Space Marine 2, Warhammer 40K Dark Tide is like a huge one for me. I have a lot of hours logged in. I mean, not as much as a lot of other people, but for me, it's a lot. And then Bulk Gun was excellent. So anyway, going back to Space Marine 2 story, like no one knows who this big bad is. And there's a couple things of like in one of the final cutscenes, like this demon host freezes everybody, and like the only people who aren't frozen are the four most important people to the plot at that particular moment. Like it's just weird,
okay,
lazy writing shit like that.
mm.
Um, but I think where the story really shines is the fact that uh, I think the arc with you and your squad, with Titus and his two battle brothers that you progress with the entire campaign with, I think that's really good. It reminded me a lot of old school like Xbox 360 single player campaigns, like huge set pieces, blowing shit up, shooting a lot of things, and cool interactions between you and your squad mates. Um, I mean, like again, it's a serviceable campaign. It's nothing special from like a story point of view, but if you are a 40K fan, like this is probably one of the best representations of this universe that you'll probably ever get in video games. Dark
Hmm.
Tide is really good, but it honestly can't hold a flame to this game because of the scale, the swarm engine, and just the graphics overall. Like it's a gorgeous game. The Swarm engine does a fucking phenomenal job at highlighting like what the Tyranid Swarm is and what it could be. And the way that they all swarm you, and it's the Swarm Engine 2.0. It's a evolution of the engine they used in World War Z, and the way that like they swarm you and surround you, and I've said it before, the performance for this game is actually remarkable considering the amount of units on screen. So they did a really good job with that. Um, the sense of weight and movement that you have as a space marine, they fucking nailed it. Like you feel big and like heavy and weighty no matter what you do, but you also move with like this insane purpose and
Yes.
like freakish sense of agility
Mm-hmm.
that is only representative of like what an Adeptus Astartes could be. Like it's so fucking cool, and then it really fulfills the power fantasy of what a Space Marine is. So as far as like the feel of the game, it's great. The moment to moment combat is fantastic. I actually think that the Dark Tide moment to moment combat is better overall, but it's a different animal. It's a first person shooter. It's not a third person action game. Um, but the story, the single player campaign is it's serviceable. It's good if you like Warhammer, you like action games, you will like this. It's nothing like spectacular. I think it really rides more on the fact that the game looks gorgeous and they nailed the feeling of what it is to be a space marine. I think that's what carries it. Um, so moving on from that, I mean, you can chime in a little bit here too with the
Well,
PVE operations mode.
yeah. To kind of touch on what you said, I pretty much agree with everything that you said leading up to this. Is
Mhm.
just the overall like what the game offers as a package, and I do think it's like the movement, the feel, the environments, the scale, all of that. I agree with completely. Um, what I would say is like the gameplay, like for the action and everything like that. I do wish it had a little bit more depth, but it's satisfying enough.
Yeah.
And talking about the PVE, uh, just like the not the campaign, but like the side mode that you're basically going to spend most of your time in to grind up your
Yeah.
classes and whatnot.
Yeah.
Um,
Operations.
yes, the operations. So there's a few things that like I hope they kind of improve because you talked a lot about the gameplay. I kind of chimed in with that, but it's like the operations almost feel a little restrictive to me. I think there's
They're a little bit restrictive and they are repetitive, but we're supposed to see where this goes with the roadmap, but we
yeah.
can't comment on that at this point,
Yeah,
obviously.
yeah, that's yeah. I'm not gonna judge it too much on what it could be, but what I would say is this: there's a couple things for me. One, it is very entertaining to like sit there with two guys that and just slaughter enemies. Right. That is like the bulk of the fun with this game, regardless
Yeah.
of what mode you're playing in. And when it works great. Like the camera angles hit just right when you're doing counters and you see your
Yeah.
buddies in the background also fighting. It's great. I have two complaints. I wouldn't call them major or minor, but they're complaints.
Okay.
One is the class system feels very very restrictive.
Well, so
Um,
this is specifically for operations because there is no
yes,
class system in campaign. You play as Titus. He has his one ability. That's that.
yes. It is. This is strictly operation speaking. So I think each of the classes has their niche that they fill, and there's certain things about them that are nice. But it's the between the fact that you can only have one of each class per squad, and the fact that each ability for each class is what kind of highlights and makes the determination of what you're going to be playing. It feels like if you don't have one class that you really love, and that class is not something somebody else that is going to play,
Hmm.
it throws like a wrench in the whole thing. And at the same time, each class has restrictions as far as what weapons they can use and what weapons they can't use, and that feels like it doesn't. I feel like it's just a bit overtuned as far as balancing is concerned in a PVE game. It's not super restrictive. It's just restrictive enough for it to bother me. You know what I mean?
Okay.
Like I feel
Yeah.
like it would have been much better served if either you could just make your marine the way you want to and go in with whatever you want, or if they put a bit more effort into giving each class multiple options to branch out from. Because it's just like, I tried the Bulwark, I tried the Vanguard, and I tried what is it, Tactical? What's the regular just run and shoot guy? Is that Tactical? It's not Assault.
Yeah, I think it's Tactical.
Yeah, it's Tactical.
Yeah, Tactical.
I kind of liked the Bulwark because it's like melee focused, and that one, like, the melee combat feels better to me than the gunplay. I ended up settling with the Vanguard because he has the grappling hook that gets you around more often, but it felt like nothing else was really going on with that class. It's got like burst fire weapons, which don't necessarily, like, the gunplay feels fine, but it's not, satisfying enough to like differentiate and make it stand out. It really just feels like, do you want the grappling hook, or do you want like do you want like a buff for your teammates? And then by the time you get to the Tactical, his abilities literally just highlight enemies in a certain space, and it doesn't feel like impactful or fun. I don't know.
I understand like the complaint with the Tactical, but I will say that the debuff abilities for the Tactical class are actually super helpful on the higher difficulties, because you can really debuff the enemies into oblivion. But it doesn't erase the fact that it probably doesn't feel powerful if you're the one doing it. Like, you're going to notice it if you're going to shoot a beefy target.
Yes.
But beyond that, like, yeah, I understand.
No, yeah, and that's an excellent point that I was actually about to get to. There's nothing wrong with like an ability being like either more passive than active, or something that like feeds into the numbers game, but it hurts a lot when your main differentiating like factor from the rest of the classes is this very passive ability, and like all of the abilities are on a particular cooldown where you don't get to use them that often. I think I described it as being like right on the edge of being like too restrictive. I think they come out just enough. So like when you're in a situation where your main skill set is shooting, and the gunplay isn't as fun as like the melee or a mixture of gun and melee, right? And your main ability is just a passive debuff. Like, I can't imagine who would want to like play the Tactical as a full-time thing, even if you wanted to just be the guy that walks around and shoots. It kind of sounds like I'm nitpicking, but I just feel like that entire system is just not necessarily built the way that it should for like maximum fun in this.
It would be nice if like because the classes have their restrictive barriers on them for what each of them like for each respective lanes, but it would be kind of cool if you could like, yeah, you can highlight enemies as a Tactical, but like if you also had something else that was just like a different uh, what am I trying to say here? Like, if each class had more than one main ability, and there'd be like more flexibility with it. That way, you could eliminate these fucking standoffs that people are having like mid game, where you can't have two characters of the same class in the same game. I don't know. This is just armchair quarterbacking.
Yeah, I know. It's tough
saying.
To say. I think as you were kind of talking about it, you mentioned something that I was thinking, which is having multiple abilities, be it at your disposal or just to choose from. You know what I'm reminded of?
What?
Outriders.
Yeah,
imagine what not like a 1-to-1 with like what we're dealing with, but I'm just like I think of Outriders because I'm just like, some of the things that Outriders did could apply here. And what I mean by that is like having either multiple abilities or just at least being able to choose through multiple abilities. Not saying each game should just be like just a copy of like something else, but like having this discussion, I'm just like, what would fix it? I'm just like, I think of Outriders because as much as we never really went back to that game, it had a plethora of different things you could throw into your ability, and that's not to say Space Marine doesn't have that. There's a wide selection of perks that you can like spec into that kind of like gas up your whatever class you happen to be playing. It's not like a done deal once you're there. It's just your kit doesn't really expand, and if your kit's weak from the get-go as far as like feeling your input into what you're doing and making the best of how you play. Like
Hmm.
perks does nothing. Like, yeah, it's a numbers game, we can play efficiently if we want, but we should be feeding you have a good basis with the melee in the somewhat decent gunplay, right? Why not feed
Yeah.
into that more instead of just playing a numbers game? I guess was my whole thing. And obviously, it's not the case with all of them. You've been having a lot of fun with the heavy. If you want to be more active, there is the assault class with the jump pack. Like I said, I enjoy the grapple when I get it enough to do it. There are things in there that are a lot of fun. I just feel like I think I described it to you. If not, you're gonna know what I'm talking about. I hope this game gets like kind of a cracking open of the system, the same way that Call of Duty World War II did, where they had
Yeah,
this
I
class
don't know if
system.
you should hold your breath for that one.
No, like I'm just saying, like, they had a system.
Because what
They,
they did with World War, so their skill system functions very similarly to World War
Mhm,
Z. I don't know if you ever played that with us,
I do.
but they added on immensely to that system as time went on with World War Z. Like they added in additional skills, they added in prestige modes, they added in, um, I mean, I guess it was really just those two things. But the way that the prestige mode functioned was like every time you prestige, you unlocked access to like a different um, skill or like a base function, something like that.
Okay.
Uh, and they kept on adding to it, so that it really injected a lot of replayability into the game. And the way that the skill tree is laid out in Space Marine 2, it's extremely similar, if not an evolution of how they handled their skills in World War Z. So I mean, I guess it could happen just going based off of their history as a studio. Like the same thing that was going on with Dark Tide. Like I've been
Mm,
saying that um, for like months now that Fat Shark has been supporting Vermintide 2 for like I don't know, 7, 8 years, something like that, and it's unrecognizable from what it was when it first came out. They've added an immense amount of content to the game. They've changed their systems. They've done a bunch of shit, and Darktide is now kind of going down the same route. They've added more weapons, more content, more maps. They've added well, they are going to add like the weapon crafting overhaul at the end of this month, which I'm very excited for.
mhm.
I would love it if they added more playable characters or classes, but we'll see what happens with that. I mean, Space Marine just going from the studio's history with World War Z, which is very similar to this game, like it is a possibility. Just have to see where it goes.
Yeah. Hoping for the best because, like I said, there is a good base there. I think there's a lot of neat things they could
Um,
do. It's just
yeah. So, I mean, that was pretty much the operations overview. I mean, I still love it. It's a lot of fun to play
yeah.
with friends. I'm still grinding out my classes. The third and final mode is Eternal War, which is the PvP mode. I will say it's a lot of fun. It reminds me a whole lot of like old school Xbox 360 era
Mm,
PvP modes. Like there isn't like a ton of balancing, but like every class kind of has a counter to a different class, which is kind of nice. But it's clearly unfinished. Like there's 3 maps. There's I think 3 modes. Um, only what was the other thing? Like if you hover over the mode, it doesn't tell you what it is. You have to just kind of infer what it is by the name of it. So shit like that, like it's clearly unfinished. So hopefully they'll add to that as well. But it just reminds me of like old school Xbox games where you don't really have to worry about sweating your ass off. It's just play the game to have fun. I mean, yeah, there's progression involved, but it's completely separate from the operations mode. So I guess there is like a carrot on a stick to chase,
yeah.
but it reminds me a lot of like the games that were around when we were growing up, and I
Yeah.
actually really appreciate that.
Yeah, they're like I said, I haven't tried it yet, so I'll take your word for it. And like, I mean, that's the feel of the entire game, really. And you kind of mentioned it
Yeah.
before when you were talking about the campaign, so that definitely is there. I will say I have seen some clips of it, and underneath these clips of that mode, there's a lot of debate going on because it's just like, oh
Mm.
my god, look at this movement. And the people saying that are they're saying, hey, it's a lot of fun, showing shit you can do with the jump packs and whatnot. Or people are saying like, wow, why is this so slow? Like the people who are burnt out from Call of Duty and whatnot. And it's kind of sparked that whole argument about like competitive PvP modes and how a lot of the modern offerings are just like for people who are like in their mind just twitching constantly, and like this is like just something they can't comprehend is something a little slower but still looks cool and fun to do. So that was kind of interesting. I don't know if I'm sure I'll try it at a certain point. We're kind of hampered by the fact that as of
I
right
think that
now,
that's something that I want to touch. I think that's a ridiculous fucking restriction.
yeah,
Uh,
we're
oh
talking
my god!
about
So the game has
crossplay.
crossplay,
Right.
but only console can play with console on PvP, and only PC can play with PC on PvP as well. Like I think that's so fucking stupid, and I don't think it's gonna help anybody in the long run. It's just
Yeah.
gonna make me not be able to play with my friends.
Yep.
So that bugs me big
Well, we'll
time.
see. Well, you mentioned, or somebody mentioned they might have said that it's temporary and that might change as things go on. Is
I
that
hope
true?
so.
Or okay,
I don't know. I didn't see that.
okay.
I
Well,
don't
then
think so.
we'll
At least.
we'll pretend it didn't happen. Just erase that from your mind. That never happened.
Yeah.
But
So that
yeah.
bugs me. I mean, overall, I think it's a really good product.
Mm-hmm.
It's a whole lot of fun. It reminds me of when I was growing up. Uh, and I mean, I think it's worth $60 at the
Yeah.
end of the day, and it's only going to get better. Like I'm looking at the roadmap right now.
Mm-hmm.
Every season, they're adding a new enemy type, which I think is fucking awesome.
Oh, that's
They're adding,
yeah.
yeah. According to this, they're adding a new enemy type. They're adding more PVE missions every season. Season
Mm-hmm.
4 is supposed to get the Horde mode, which I think they need to move that up because this game is going to live or die on that Horde mode at the end of the day.
Yeah.
I was right. In Season 3, they're adding PVE prestige ranks, which
Okay.
most likely means that we are going to be getting more skills. At least if they handle it the same way that they handled World War Z, and I don't see why they wouldn't because
Yeah.
it's basically the same game with a different skin.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Well, I'm pretty much in agreement. I do think it's a very well polished product put together. I will say the only two things I'll say that's that I didn't get a chance to touch on is you mentioned scale. At a certain point, I do think it handles scale like very well. Like I don't
yeah.
whether it's just we finally got some people who know how to use the technology that we're currently dealing with, or they're just phenomenal with smoke and mirrors to make some of the massive structures and environments that they do.
It looks so good.
Yeah, I wouldn't say blown away, but it's nice to see a studio bring something like that up to par, where I think there's been a lot of faltering. Like I've seen companies like Square Enix, for example, massive AAA studios that have to do environments like that, and they do it not nearly as well as Saber did here. So that was I was impressed by that. The only other thing I'll mention, and this is I hope this kind of gets tuned at a certain point. You mentioned before, you've mentioned it tons of times when we've been talking about the game leading up to the release, hordes and hordes of enemies, right? I feel like the operations mode, I don't know if this happens too much in campaign. All the missions I've played in campaign didn't have this issue. I feel like there are too many lulls in combat. I feel like there's a lot
have you
of
played? What was the highest difficulty level that you've played so far? Because I was doing a mission on Substantial earlier, which is one below the hardest, and it was a challenge. Like we made it to the boss, we ended up wiping, but it was tough.
Yeah, I guess I'll reserve my judgment until I try the difficulties. I don't know what difficulties I've tried because I've been, either with you or with Eric. So I'm assuming, right in the middle, somewhere around there.
Okay.
Because like we've played on, I think we played on like a harder mode because there was a point where we were wiping a lot. But my issue isn't so much the challenge. I feel like there are parts where like we're walking along and it's almost like we're hitting mobs like you would in something like an MMO or something that's a little bit slower paced, and I feel like those kind of small groupings don't really work as well in Space Marine, where it's really about fighting hordes at a time. I don't know. It's a small nitpick. That's the only other thing I really have to say about the game. Is there are
those.
yeah, and it's just I feel like there are moments in PvE in operations where like it's not like completely quiet and you're not in the middle of fighting like a massive, during an event, which there's plenty of, but I feel like at some points your enemy like density is a little too thin. That's really it.
Okay.
Yeah, but overall, would probably recommend to anyone who likes Warhammer. I don't know.
Yeah, it's definitely it's a fan service game, and there's nothing wrong with that. Warhammer is like, oh god, any of their games range anywhere from like fucking awful to, if you're a Warhammer fan, this is fucking awesome. And I
Mm.
think that the Space Marine 2 falls into this is fucking awesome. If you are into this universe, I think this game is actually going to turn a lot of different people who otherwise wouldn't be into Warhammer 40k fans,
Mm.
which is a net positive. So that's cool.
Yeah.
All right. Well, moving on from there,
Yeah,
I
move on
think
from Space
the
Marine.
next biggest thing that we have to talk about is undoubtedly going to be the PS5 Pro
Yeah.
reveal.
That's
So again, I want you to take the lead on this one because you probably know a little bit more than I mean. I know what they're changing and the price and how I feel about it. That's really about it.
well, I mean, it was kind of expected at a certain point that we would be
The
getting
worst kept secret in the industry.
yeah, that we would be getting like a mid-generation or a late to mid-generation increase. I mean, I don't have too much to say on it, just aside from the fact that it's so weird to me. All of my comments don't have to do with the hardware itself, which it's just like the price I think is out of control. I don't know how you could just like, here's the thing, if it was an amazing thing and it was doing all the things that people are claiming, which we'll get to, I would say maybe, but like it's hamstrung by one simple thing. There's where's the library? You know, I'm not going to be that guy because everybody's going to say, "Oh, the PlayStation's got no games," and you know, part of that is true. I mean, what does it really have, really, to justify?
Well, as of now, not really anything.
What, you got Astrobot? Like I don't know. That was my first reaction was, holy shit, that price, and then followed by, who's going to buy this when there's no games, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So what have they changed
$700?
specifically? They highlighted the big three. That's what they're calling it. It's like
Mm.
AI upscaling, like a larger. God, what the fuck was it? Hold on. Yeah, talk.
You said AI driven upscaling, ray tracing options, and just a larger GPU. And people are saying that the GPU in there rivals like the top end AMD right now.
I don't think that's true. Top end, maybe mid.
It's what is it? What's the top end AMD right now? What line are they in?
Off the top of my head, I have no fucking idea. I'm usually an NVIDIA guy.
60. Let me look this up because I think the one that was getting thrown around was the AMD 6800 was the one that it rivals, and that's like a $500 card.
Okay.
Yeah. I mean, damn, I am just not up to date with all the graphics. I was never an AMD guy anyway. That's one.
Well, I mean, be that as it may, like $700 is a lot of money, man.
700. Here's here's the funny thing about that. Aside from it being a lot of money, everybody immediately started making the comparison to the PlayStation 3's launch, where they were saying $599, and that was a lot of money, right? And everybody's favorite guy, Jeff Keighley, he stepped out of the shadows and he said, "Let me hit you with this factoid, guys." And he lists out all the PlayStation consoles ever adjusted for inflation, and it was to kind of show the new PlayStation 5 Pro in a better light. Here's a couple things. He didn't include the disc drive. The disc drive is why is that fucking thing $80?
Yeah, that's fucking ludicrous.
That's insane.
It's a Blu-ray player.
Yeah, so if you want like a real console experience, you're gonna be spending over $800 on this fucking thing.
Yeah. Yep.
I just like I'm stumbling here just because like we could look it up and we could talk up and down about the specs. The price, the lack of a library, I'm just like, I'm befuddled. Like I don't like
my favorite was like the side-by-side images or videos that they decided to show to try to illustrate like how much better the PS5 Pro is to the PS5, and it's like you can barely fucking see a difference.
Bro, I'm sitting there going like there's two sides to that, right? is you'll have the games where you could barely tell the difference in fidelity. It's like maybe the crowds in the distance are a little sharper, or maybe the foliage is a little fuller, and like some of that's nice, I guess. But like the problem is, like, when you bring that up, they'll be like, oh, and also it runs at a silky smooth 60 frames per second, right? And my response to that is, I thought like one of the big selling points of this generation as a whole was, hey, we're finally going to have 60 frames per second anyway. So it's like, I don't know. It's like, I think I'm at my breaking point with like just hardware, like a hardware upgrade just for, squeezing blood from a stone on fidelity, and you selling me a frame rate that you should be able to just hit stability wise anyway. I'm just like, I'm like, so you're selling me something you should be giving me anyway, and I'm not gonna, like, there's nothing to fucking play on this console. I'm like,
well, you're paying $700 for like upscaling everything that you have already played. Nothing new. There's nothing new.
And you have all like the graphics junkies, the guys coming out there. Like, I heard something ridiculous where like they're saying like, I got this. I was playing this game initially and it gave me motion sickness and the frame rate was too low. But now on the PlayStation 5 Pro, I can play that as silky smooth and I don't get sick anymore. I'm just like, is this where we're at? Where it's like, instead of like brand new games and using this technology to the best of its abilities, we're just going to talk about like, maybe we'll get like an extra 20 frames and the crowds in the distance are going to get like a little sharper. Like, I don't know, like, the hardware is impressive. I get that. But, and like, all of these consoles, both Xbox Series consoles, the vanilla, PlayStation 5, this new PlayStation 5 Pro, it's like, you're just selling me shit that we should have had like down already. The technology is already phenomenal. You can get great looking and smooth running experiences on these things. You just need to like make them. You don't need to like keep like, I don't give a fuck about AI upscaling. I don't give a shit about like the latest version of ray tracing, because the technology has been like here and amazing for so long. It's like, you're just, like I said, it's like blood from a stone with like fidelity and performance. It's, I think I said this a while ago, and I know you wanted to talk about the PlayStation, but it's really just an industry fucking issue. I said this a while ago, where it's like, technology has come so far that like the only thing it's really doing now is we're just getting better and better hardware to cover for the fact that the developers aren't what they used to be, and they need like overhead on performance and stability because the games that they're making don't run right. And like, that's all this feels like to me. Like, I think one of the weirdest comparisons that I got is Final Fantasy VII Rebirth, right? It's on the PlayStation 5. Like, people are saying, oh, finally, I can finally play this game. And I'm just sitting there going, it doesn't look all that different from Remake, and Remake ran on a vanilla PlayStation 4. So what are we doing here? Like, the next one is going to come out because it's a trilogy of games that cover this Remake series. The trilogy is going to come out on the fucking PlayStation 6 or whatever, the final game in the trilogy, that is. And we're going to have people going like, I couldn't really play the last game on the PlayStation 5 Pro, but now that the PlayStation 6 is here, I can really play the game. It's shills and people that just like, the second there's something new and something flashier, they just gotta have it, are gonna propel this further than it has any right going. That's really my only thing. Like, it's so bizarre that like the like they announced a new step up in hardware, which I can appreciate good hardware. I think we both can. But it's just
there's
like,
nothing to fucking play on it.
There's nothing to fucking play on it. And all of the issues about it, all of the, I'm sorry, not all the issues about it, but all of the issues that it solves are like man-made issues. Like, we're not like breaking any ceilings here. We're just like saying like, or like, I'm sure it'll run like GTA. Here's my prediction, right? Here's my prediction. The PlayStation 5 Pro will run Grand Theft Auto 6 at 30 frames per second or lower, and the game running at 60 frames per second will be a selling point for the PlayStation 6. That's my fucking prediction. That's where we're at, right? That's all I have to say about the PlayStation 5 Pro. It's giving me shit I don't need to play games it doesn't have.
Oh my god.
But it'll sell more as a status symbol for people that want to play sports games or some shit,
Yep.
you know? And console war fanboys and shit like that. It'll just be that's
Console
the PlayStation 5 Pro.
fanboys. Yeah, I don't know, man. I don't think we need it. And like you hear the argument of like, oh, it's $700, spend a little bit more money, get a PC. Or like, I don't think it's spend a little. Like, you have to probably spend like an extra $500 to get like actually like a decent middle of the road PC that will run pretty much anything that you're going to throw at it, from anywhere from like medium to high medium settings.
Yes.
And
don't
I understand the argument of like. I understand both sides of the argument. I'll put it that way.
Yeah,
I understand both sides of that.
Yeah, don't get me wrong, because I've said this before. There is still that aspect of it in play where it's just like you buy a console for no fuss. You get it way cheaper than a computer, and you pop games in, and it just runs a certain way. And you know, sometimes that way will be lower than the frame rate you want, or the graphics scaled back a little bit. But it like that's the point of the console: is you sit the box down, you plug it in, you throw a game in it, and it works. Some people don't want to be bothered with the hassle or the little extra money that you have to pay for a computer, right? I get that. That's still there. You know, all of my complaints about the PlayStation 5 are still there too, but I understand why somebody would buy a console. I don't necessarily understand why somebody would buy the PlayStation 5 Pro for all the reasons we just discussed, but I understand, like, that doesn't take away from the appeal of a console to me.
Yeah.
And the other thing I will say is that I don't remember if it was an insider that said this or like somebody in the know at Sony said this, but because of the fact that, like, you know, Xbox is kind of in the position that it's in and Nintendo's off doing its own thing, that Sony felt emboldened to price this as high as they did and release it at this price. And that just feeds into another thing I said, where it's just like, you do not want a video game industry where one of these companies runs unopposed, because then you get something like, when all is said and done, at the end of the day, you're paying like $850 with tax and the necessary accessories just to get a console in your room. You know, we want there's a lot of things that lead to that console price, but let me tell you right now, you want the competition there so that they don't like do this as like a default.
Yeah.
So that's very bleak, I guess, the PlayStation 5 Pro.
I don't even really know what much else to say about it. Like, I don't know anybody that that's a lie. Never mind. Anywho,
we know at least one fairly well-off Sony fanboy that will be very excited for the PlayStation 5 Pro.
Yeah.
Yeah, but
who shall remain nameless.
we don't like to throw our friends under the bus here.
Yeah. I mean, I'm really racking my brain right now for more news. The you know of my enjoyment of Remnant 2, right?
Yeah.
Didn't I tell you that they were coming out with another DLC?
Really? I thought the last one was the last one.
Yeah, the Dark Horizon DLC. It comes out on the 24th of this month, so about 10 days from now.
Oh, so that is the last one that they're doing. It just never came out.
To be the last
okay.
one.
I thought it came out a while ago.
Yeah, there's like a free mode for there's a free boss rush mode for all players, and then like you gotta buy the DLC, like the expansion, if you want that. I'll probably jump in and check it out a little bit. I have like 100 hours in the game, but I don't know if I'm gonna like really go balls deep into it like I did before. So I don't know. We'll see. But that's coming out. There's a new war bond for Helldivers too.
I heard
Chemical agents.
I heard that there's some hope on the horizon.
Yeah, like apparently they're supposed to be rebalancing like almost everything. Because I mean the game does kind of get to this spot where it's like, okay, this is bullshit. My guns aren't doing anything, and I'm just literally overrun by.
We've talked plenty about that.
So,
and I don't want to jump into an area that I'm unfamiliar with and just say, oh, I hear things are getting bad. That's just like, I've heard it all before. I just hear that they're rolling out balance changes and adding new things.
Yeah, so that's cool. We'll see how that. I mean, I already on the game, right? I'm gonna jump in and see what that is. See what that's. Yeah, I'm in. What else we got? What else has?
I mean, you mentioned things that you're looking forward to. For the first time in a long time, I have like multiple games that I'm like, oh, this looks neat, and I'm excited for. To the point where my mind isn't anticipated. My mind just isn't used to that kind of feeling. So like I keep like there's like 3 games I'm interested in, and I keep fucking forgetting their names because I'm not used to being excited for like more than one thing a year. There's
oh man, that's a terrible way to live.
Yeah, I saw this neat little game called Nightmare Operator the other day, and it's like an action.
Vaguely familiar.
Yeah, I think it's like the first, not major because it's like an indie title, but it was one of the first like pre-TGS announcements, or trailers, I should say. It was announced beforehand. But yeah, it's called Nightmare Operator. It's an action horror title. It's a third-person shooter, which immediately gets my attention because there's not enough of those right now. It's got some light melee elements, but it's like my kind of game because it's like a slower, rigid. Not necessarily full horror. It's meant to like have spooky elements, like you're fighting like demons and ghosts and shit like that, and it's all stylized in this 3D like retro that's kind of popular, where they're trying to do like PlayStation and Nintendo 64 aesthetic, but like with higher graphics. So that looks really nice, and it's got a very nice style and atmosphere, and looks like you're like very tense combat where you're shooting all these ghosts and creepy shit. And then there were not one but 2 side-scroller shooters I'm interested in. One is the Scramble Vice, which is like this mech, shooter, which is very bombastic, over-the-top action, very stylish.
Love my mechs.
Yeah, and then there's Nitro Express, which is kind of like I want to say Metal Slug, but it's like how they handle and like the weightiness of it is kind of like all they have in common. It's both pixel art too, but it's over the top action, explosions, constant moving and shooting and shit like that. And I'm just like, it is so nice to have things that just show up in front of me and look appealing to like, but I'm smacked by the fact all of them are coming out in 2025. It's like, am I even going to be alive in 2025? Like,
yes, you will. Shut up.
Yeah, I know. I'm joking around, but it's like it's so bizarre. Like I said, I'm only used to remembering and waiting for like one thing at a time, and then the rest of it is just pleasant surprises. But that's really all I've got on that. You just said like, oh, I'm waiting for something. I'm like, I too am actually waiting for something.
The hope in your voice just now was something.
I know. I needed that after talking
about. I too am waiting for something.
I needed that after talking about the fucking PlayStation 5.
Oh my god. Do you have anything else as far as news, big or small, this week?
I've got some light spattering of light news from the industry.
Okay.
I heard Xbox laid off some people.
Oh, you heard that? I actually didn't.
Yeah, no. I forget it's directly related to gaming. It's just kind of across all their studios. They laid off about 650 people. And I was like, okay, just gonna keep happening until things get better in the industry. You know my opinion on that. I don't want to go nuts here because I didn't look directly into it, but it's just how it is. What else? Annapurna Interactive. You ever hear of them before?
Yeah, aren't they publishing Control 2 now?
Not anymore. They're not.
What happened? That was like recent news, I thought.
The entirety of their staff resigned.
What? For what?
Because there was a dispute with the owner. We don't know all the details yet, but basically it was over creative differences, which is weird because they're mainly a publisher that does flex work for the developers. The first game that they were ever going to develop their own was like a Blade Runner game. But yeah, so they were mainly
I
a
still don't
publisher.
understand the fucking obsession with Blade Runner. I don't get it. I
I
saw the movie 2 times. I didn't think it was fantastic.
the thing about Blade Runner is, regardless of whether you like the movie or not, it's not like it doesn't. It's the groundwork has not been laid for it to be like a multimedia franchise. You know, like, so why there's games coming out, whatever. That's a whole other fucking conversation. But yeah, so over, like, apparently, like, the president of the studio was like, they were in deliberation with the owner, and something with creative differences came up, and they basically spun it in a way that where they wanted to go independent, so they had more creative control, and the owner pulled out of the discussions. So in retaliation, they just all resigned. It was a small enough studio where they could collectively make that decision. I think it was in the double digits, like somewhere around 30 people worked there. And so now all the partners are, they're kind of all over the place, because it's just like, they're still technically publishing these things, the deals are in place, but there's no employees. So, that was kind of crazy. Other than that, Square Enix found themselves in hot water at a certain point in the week. I forget what day exactly.
Another one.
Yeah. So, have you ever heard of Dragon Quest?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, everybody kind of has, but I figured I'd test it. It is a legacy RPG from Japan. It's kind of like it's almost like siblings with Final Fantasy. It's so Square Enix. I don't want to go too deep in the history. Square Enix, you know that it's Square Enix because it was two companies that merged at a certain point, right?
Yes.
Okay, so there was Squaresoft, who did Final Fantasy and a ton of other games, and then you had Enix, which did Dragon Quest and a bunch of other games, and they merged with Square Enix. Anyway, so Square Enix in recent years has been getting into a trend of different games and remakes that are called 2D HD remakes and games and shit like that. It's kind of like if you ever saw Octopath Traveler, where it's like 2D sprites in 3D environments.
Yes.
Yeah, I'm not going to bore you with the details, but anyway, Dragon Quest, I believe it's the first 3 games. 3 is definitely part of that, but I'm pretty sure it's the first 3 games, is getting one of those. And as Square Enix is currently all in on a lot of the modern, sensibilities, the global sensibilities that we like to talk about, they went back and they censored more than a few things. And they made some changes in there. Scantily clad, outfits now have very bizarre coverings underneath them, where it's like almost like, imagine like fantasy elements, like, be it JRPGs or Conan. You'll have a woman in like a chainmail bikini, right? That you're familiar with that concept, right?
Yeah.
Imagine that, only she's wearing like a t-shirt and shorts underneath it. Like, that's the kind of censorship we're talking about. And on top of that, they're doing the whole, it can't be male and female, it's got to be type A, type B, and all that stuff. And now people are annoyed by that enough, but there's one other problem with that. Do you know who the main designer for Dragon Quest is? Or was, I should say? Akira Toriyama. And he unfortunately passed this year. I gotta say, it's not often that you kind of wake the Japanese up. They're normally very complacent in a lot of ways. They don't get necessarily as angry or riled up as, I do on a weekly basis. So they were not thrilled with that, because it's kind of seen as like a legacy thing. So I doubt they're going to make changes, but it's waking, some, audiences up to some of those stuff. So it's, just another knock against Square Enix, who has been struggling quite a bit in recent years. So it's just a small thing. So yeah.
All right. Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I think we're kind of running out of rope here.
I have 2 things. One's another small thing, and one is just, we'll end with another rant, as I am one to do.
Oh my god. We must be going on some kind of a successive episode record with us ending on fucking one of your rants.
Yeah, but it's going to be necessary. But the last news story I want to get to is, have you been keeping up with Ubisoft?
I know their stock is kind of in the shitter. Is that what you're referring to?
Yeah, it's dropping, and it's not recovering, to the point where investors are demanding the company either right ship immediately or go private. Like that's how bad the stock is doing.
Oh,
Yeah,
wow.
like open letters to CEOs are getting passed around. So they either need to make changes or Assassin's Creed Shadows needs to pull them out of this, because ever since they've been in the spotlight because of the Assassin's Creed stuff, and the Star Wars Outlaws game came out and it just sucked. Their stock has just not recovered. Like everybody likes to say, like, oh, sometimes it dips 3 days when controversy hits and then it bounces back. It is not bouncing back like at all. So
Well, good,
they are,
honestly,
yeah,
because
yeah, good.
Ubisoft has
Fuck
been
them.
putting out fucking consistent garbage for like 15 years.
Yeah,
Like, enough.
yeah, it's pretty bad.
Just enough.
Yeah,
Christ.
Ubisoft. I have a particular grudge against Ubisoft because they are like the one European based company. They just have a massive amount of like amazing IPs that are just mishandled and just not in a good way. They just they just sit on them and they occasionally like ruin the series further. But yeah, so Ubisoft, I'm hoping Shadows has accrued enough bad will to like just like force their hand, because I'm tired of Ubisoft. So tired of it. They either need a right ship or they need to fucking go.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we'll see what happens there.
I mean, hey, they made the first quadruple A game with Skull and Bones. Who are we to criticize anything they do?
So true, Dan. So true. maybe the stock will be back tomorrow. I don't know what the fuck I'm talking about.
Yeah. I don't think you do.
Yeah.
Maybe you should shut the fuck up.
I will, and I will shut the fuck up and talk about something that I am more familiar with, Dan.
All right, give me a rant. Let's go.
Daniel.
Anthony.
This is it.
Yeah.
This is the last time we gather for this podcast before the release of the Dead Rising Deluxe Remaster.
Oh, boy. Okay. Here we go.
I won't say exactly how, but all I'll say is that I didn't pay, but I was able to get my hands on it. So I will be playing it, and I will be able to give thorough comparisons and whatnot for whatever that's worth. And I've actually got between now and the game coming out, I'll have like 3 videos come out, talking about certain things about it. But man, it has been a roller coaster leading up to this, because of all the things I imagined after Dead Rising 4 came and went, I was not expecting an out-of-the-blue remaster that learned absolutely nothing. I never would have imagined a quiet and protective community in the Dead Rising community. People who have less tolerance for games like Dead Rising 3 than I do, to have such a turn in the general disregard for Dead Rising 1, which is a masterpiece of a game.
Mm-hmm.
The arguments about the game have gotten so fucking out of control and wacky, because it's like it's so simple. It's like, hey, this game was made easier. Hey, it had its edge and its tension, kind of filed away. Hey, the performances aren't necessarily as good. Hey, some things about the graphics don't look all that great. Hey, there's censorship, and censorship is an objective bad. And the people who are like carrying the water for this fucking game, Dan, it's gotten to the point where they are lamenting that online platforms have free speech. I've seen more than a few people like get to the point where they're just like, I can't believe, you can just say whatever you want on Twitter and shit like that. Like, that's how bad it's fucking gotten with these people, because apparently they're used to having full control, because the Dead Rising community is rather small and is rather niche. And so I guess they're just used to like dissenting opinions just going away or being dealt with at a certain point. But, I don't want to talk too much about the community. It's just, it's bizarre to me that like the community and just the reception around it as a whole has really gotten to the point where like they're arguing things that just don't matter. Like, we've heard stories and we've talked about things, like the term woke, right? And shit like that. And people are talking woke versus non-woke about it, like the extremes on both sides. And it's fucking frustrating to me, as that really has nothing to do with it, really. You can make that argument about Capcom's policies or whatever and how they handle it, but it does not have bearing on the game. Dead Rising, like the most you could say as far as politicalness that it gets is it's like a satire and a critique on American consumerism and like interfering in other countries, but like that does like that's interesting, but it does the game such little justice to just distill it to that and then try and put it on like a political side and a spectrum in your fucking arguments. It's just Dead Rising 1 is a phenomenal game. It's a masterpiece. It's a great survival horror game. It's rigid in all the right ways. It's unforgiving in some ways. It has a handful of issues that needed to be fixed with it. And to see this remaster come out and just kind of like shit all over certain things, offer me, worse aspects of the game, than there's ever been before, just a lesser version of the game in all the ways that matter, from difficulty to handling to performances and character designs, and to have that all hand-waved because of just nice looking graphics. Doesn't the mall just look so nice now? Isn't the lighting so good? The default engine lighting, doesn't it look nice now? It's like, oh, look, there's a beautiful sunset you can view in the game now, and it's just like, but what about everything else? What about the game as a complete package? It's just so much lesser in ways that I can't really, even in a rant like this, I can't even do justice. It's gonna be a sit down and talk about it for 15 minutes each individual aspect of the game, because it's just I don't know, and it hits me hard. Somebody actually posited this to me and said that Silent Hill 2 is also getting a remake. He's like, how does it feel to have two of the best survival horror games ever made get really shitty remakes back to back? And I said, Silent Hill 2 is also a masterpiece, but I don't feel as passionately about it because Dead Rising is my 5th favorite game of all time. And to see it treated in such a way and have, just over time, over 18 years, all the naysayers and the people who liked it for all the weirdest reasons, all the people that just wanted to kill zombies, and they kind of say, oh, the story doesn't matter, the characters don't matter, all the polish doesn't matter, I just want to sit down and kill zombies. People who weren't even necessarily alive when the first game came out, or were 10 years old or younger, tell me 18 years later after the game came out that it's just it was never about X, Y, or Z. It wasn't about a polished experience, a story that was told a certain way, and a unique take on the genre. It was just the zombie killing game, because these people started with Dead Rising 3 and Dead Rising 4, and that's all they want to fucking do. So it is painful to watch this, and it's painful to watch all the people that used to champion the series for all the things that made it unique and wonderful and one of the best games ever made, to turn their back on it just because of some flashy graphics and some older content restored in it, which don't get me wrong, I'm a fan of restoring older content, but it's just, what a fucking nightmare. I didn't even shout once that entire thing. I'm just beaten at this point. It's the game comes out in 6 days, so probably a little earlier if you know how to take a trip to New Zealand with the fucking time zone shit. But it's
I get it.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't have much to say. It's just a matter of I don't anticipate it flopping. I also don't anticipate it selling well enough for Capcom to give a shit about it. So I guess my only hope, it would be a pleasant surprise if it flopped, but I'm not delusional enough to think that it's a guaranteed thing it will. My only hope lies with all the people that overreact in all the wrong ways, the people who just look at they'll see a screenshot of a woman that's slightly unattractive and they'll just freak out and go oh, the game's terrible. I kind of need to enemy of my enemy is my friend with them in a way. It's okay, if you want to go bitch about that, go tell all your friends the game's woke. I don't care. I just let Dead Rising die. Let it die, please. Just fucking let it end. We'll try it again. The 25th or the 30th anniversary of Dead Rising, we'll get another remake or something, and hopefully all this bullshit is just gone and we actually know how to treat it right.
I wish I knew what to say to all of this.
And it's
you can't enjoy anything.
Yeah, you're not
it's
allowed.
Just,
yeah, it is what it is. All my favorite shit just kind of gets raked over the coals. My only consolation is there's rumors going around that one of my other favorite games of all times was also getting a remake, and like that's apparently been canceled or is on the back burner. So I won't get constantly fisted. I guess I don't know.
Never say
But yeah,
never.
yeah. There's always time for a good fisting, I guess. But we'll see. We'll see what happens. Like I said, while Capcom did not see a single cent of my money, I will be playing the game. So I guess we'll do like an autopsy or a eulogy next week.
Okay.
Yeah. So that's all I got for you. I'm
Alrighty.
sad and
Well, I
tired
think,
now.
yeah. Well, I have to keep on ending it on those, you fucking psycho.
Listen, some things are unpleasant, but they need to be talked about.
I agree. I agree.
Yep. You can't. Yeah.
Um, well, on that note of unpleasantness, I think this is about as good a spot as any to wrap it up.
Mm-hmm.
If you are listening, you made it to the end. Thank you for listening. I appreciate you.
Yeah.
And until next week, Dan and Anthony with the Pregame Network. Talk to everyone later. Bye.
Bye.
Uh.